Retirement for Life. Your passport to a comfortable and confident retirement. The podcast that's equal parts education and entertainment, where we break down the retirement maze with a dash of fun and a heap of wisdom from your host, Christian Sear CPA, the passionate retirement specialist and president of Sear Financial Wealth Advisors, the independent registered investment advisor specializing in the AIM retirement system.
Hey everyone, it's Chris. This is the Retirement for Life podcast. This is episode 18. Today we are going to do a little bit different type of lineup. I have just recorded a fantastic interview with Chris Christensen. He is a travel expert. He's been doing a podcast on travel since 2005. He's actually told me that as far as he knows, he has the longest running travel podcast that's out there. I looked to see if I could find another travel podcast that's been out there longer. I could not. This man has been, he's an award-winning travel journalist. He has won awards from Society of American Travel Writers, North American Travel Journalists Association. Now get this. He was actually named one year the Best Independent Travel Journalist, which is an award given out by Travel and Leisure magazine. This guy had so much information. We're going to have a hard time cutting it down into something that, but we will cut it down to something that's interesting. You know what's the number one thing when I talk to my retirees? I ask them, tell me the 3 or 4 things you want to do in your retirement, right? It's important for us to understand clients. It's important for us to understand our retirees. While there's so many different things that people say in answer to that question, one thing that is constant, I would say the one thing that every single one of my clients / retirees want to do in their retirement is travel. So I came across Chris's podcast and I thought to myself, I just have to have this guy on. We talked about cruises, cruise lines. We talked about the bucket list travel that you may want to take. We talked about what's going on in 2024. Everyone's traveling. Where are they going? We talked about so many things that I really think you'll find it interesting. And he is going to give you some things that I didn't even think about, like the difference between a travel agent and a travel advisor. Thoughts about traveling abroad versus staying home at the U.S. So give this guy a listen because I thought Chris had a lot to add to my clients and my listeners. Here he is right now, Chris Christensen, on the Retirement for Life podcast. Enjoy. All right, so we are here with Chris Christensen today. Chris, I have to say, I had to write down all of the things that they say about you because there's just so many of them. It's so impressive. Let me just read some of the things that I found fascinating. You are the host of the award-winning Amateur Traveler podcast. That's how I found you from your podcast. You're helping real-world travelers plan real trips to their own backyard or around the world. We're going to talk about that. You told me the other day over 900 episodes in your back pocket. That is fantastic, especially from a person like me who has 18. I mean, you've been doing it since 2005. Listen to some of these awards you've won, Chris, just to remind you in case you forgot, since you've won so many. Awards from the Society of American Travel Writers, North American Travel Journalists Association, and this one's pretty cool. You were named the Best Independent Travel Journalist by Travel and Leisure magazine. So thanks for joining our show today and welcome.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell me the first moment that you decided to enter into this arena of travel. Do you remember, was it a specific point in time or did you just kind of lean into this over years to get involved in the travel?
In terms of travel itself or in terms of travel podcasting?
All of the above. I mean, what's your journey been?
Okay. Travel, I got my love of travel from my folks. We did very, very little international travel. And when I say international, we just did Canada. We couldn't afford getting on a plane. And also before deregulation, that was a lot more expensive to get on a plane and travel. So my love of travel was probably developed at the national parks in the Western U.S. With pulling a little 14-foot travel trailer behind the car and visiting all these different places. So My first international trip, I very distinctly remember it was when the men landed on the moon. I watched that on a little tiny portable TV in a travel trailer park in Victoria, British Columbia.
That's
So
so great.
that was the very
And
first time I
then
was
and then
outside
you
the
were
US.
hooked. You were hooked on travel. That's
Hmm.
fantastic. Okay, so I've been hearing a lot lately about the TSA record numbers, people going through airports here in
Hmm.
America, and it just seems like this post-COVID travel boom just continues to go and go and go. And from what I gather, we're setting even more records this year in 2024. I guess my first question for you is, where are people going? I mean, what are the hot spots in 2024 that we're seeing all this travel? Do you have any feeling of where your friends and family and all your listeners are going?
Well, my friends and family, that's a little different question. So, in terms of where people going, that doesn't change a lot from year to year.
Hmm.
There are places that are the most popular, and they tend to get the bulk of the tourism. So, obviously, a lot of people are going in the U.S. They're going to New York and Orlando and Las Vegas. A lot of travel to the national parks. There are certainly a lot of people who enjoy that. Outside the U.S., most Americans are still going to places like London and Paris and Rome, or
London,
those
Paris,
three
and
countries.
Rome.
Spain has risen in terms of that. A lot of people went to Mexico in during COVID because they could. It was one of the countries that didn't close,
All
so that
right.
became one of the most popular countries for Americans. Then it's gone down a bit. Obviously, the crime issue in Mexico and in different parts of Mexico has not helped Mexico with that tourism. But those are mainly where people are going. That and then cruises,
That's
and that
interesting.
would be with U.S. travelers, Caribbean and Alaska being the most popular cruise destinations.
Mexico is an interesting point. I didn't think about that. Obviously, there's a lot of potential reasons to be concerned. Are you hearing that it's a place that maybe we should be avoiding right now, or is it overdone?
Well, so I would go to Mexico right now for
Hmm.
sure, but where you go in Mexico is similar to where you'd go in the U.S. in the sense that there are places in the U.S. that are safer than other places in the
Hmm.
U.S., that are more interesting than other places in
Sure.
the U.S. Same thing is true in Mexico. It's a fairly big country. I mean, it's not a small place, and there's lots of different places you can go. The border cities are probably things that you wouldn't necessarily
Stay
go
away
to as
from.
much as a tourist. I don't think a lot of people are going to, especially just over the border into Juarez, in northern Mexico. Not the safest place. I wouldn't go to Sinaloa. So
No, no,
any
no.
place that you can think of the cartel name there is probably not a place. But tourists weren't going there anyway.
The cartel
So the place
capital of the
where
world.
people
Don't go there.
yeah, people are going to Mexico City. Mexico City is had crime problems probably a decade ago. It's still got some crime. It's a big city, but I would go there. I would go to Yucatan. I'd go to Oaxaca. A lot of Americans love going down to San Miguel de Allende, which is the place where Mexicans think of as one of the nicest cities in Mexico. So it's a lovely place down there.
Okay.
And then obviously a lot of people going to the cruise ports.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we're going to get to a lot of stuff here. I want to talk about travel agents, travel advisors. Are they worth it? I want to talk about traveling outside of the U.S. We're going to talk about bucket list stuff, bucket travel. But I've been known to go on sidetracks. And me personally, I've traveled abroad, but I've never been to England, London. I've been through Heathrow on a connecting flight. That's it. From a
Yeah, we
personal,
don't count that.
no, it doesn't. I mean, but really, for a guy who wants to go to explore London or England
Mhm.
for the first time, and let's just say he or she wants to spend 10 days, what do you do? How would you lay out that trip if you were going to explore London/England for the first time? According to a recent study, the average American feels like they need nearly $1.5 million to retire comfortably. That's a 53% increase compared to the same study just 4 years ago. But is that the right number for you? And are you doing everything you can to maximize your financial situation? The AIM Retirement Assessment can help you figure that out. This free assessment is a simple 3-step process. Answer a few questions about yourself, Spend 15 minutes discussing your situation with one of our retirement specialists, and then we get to work. You'll receive a customized report detailing your exposure to the 7 biggest risks in retirement and the 3 most impactful action items you can take to supercharge your retirement. And if you already have a financial plan, this assessment will help you see what real retirement planning looks like. Get your AIM assessment today and see the difference between a financial generalist and a retirement specialist. Go to aimassessment.com today to get started. That's aimassessment.com.
Well, first of all, those are 2
wait a
different
second,
questions.
wait. First of all, let me say it has to at least include like 3 pubs. Okay, go.
Well, pubs are not a problem. You're going to include pubs whenever you go to England. That's a great place to eat in England.
Mm-hmm.
Although in London, there is more to the food scene than pubs now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wouldn't necessarily do as much time in pubs in London. If you go to Ireland, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
as a related place,
Okay.
then you're going to eat in pubs almost every night. You're going to have a great variety of food. You're going to have live music and things like that. So it's definitely worth going. In England, if you want to try the pub scene, absolutely, yeah, you can get a list of pubs from people who are writing about London and what do the fun pubs go to, what are the traditional pubs and things like that. So
Right.
you said England and London.
Or
So
maybe
first of all,
even
you got to decide what
Great
you
Britain.
want.
What would you do?
Right.
If you're throwing me there for
Yeah.
10 days, what do you do with me? Do you keep me in London? Do I explore England? Or
So
do I
you
just go
can
all over?
easily, yeah, you could easily do in a whole 10 days in London. I've done that.
Mhm.
We did that when we traveled with my wife when she was 6 months pregnant, and my son was something like 14 months old. And so we didn't really want to do a lot of traveling all around the country. And there's plenty to do in London for that kind of period of time, just with the sites like, watching the changing of the guard, maybe taking in a show, not if you're traveling necessarily with a young one like we were, going to some of the museums like the British Museum and seeing, the treasures from all over the world, or going to the Tower of London and, hearing the Beefeaters talk and out to Kew Garden. So, I mean, there's plenty to do in London. But if you are looking to see more of it, I think we also did, not on that trip, but later on when we went back to the kids, we did a day trip out to Stonehenge and Avebury and some of the other sites that are near London, or went up to Cambridge for a day and such. So you can do a trip just based in London, but
Mhm.
that may or may not be the right trip for you. If you're interested in getting outside and going for hiking, then I would probably direct you up to the Lake District or one of the more famous outdoor sites. We went to Liverpool when we were in England for our second trip. When my kids were probably, oh gosh, I'd
Home of
say
the
they were
Beatles.
teenagers at that point, because they were big Beatles fans,
Yeah.
and did the Magical Mystery Tour
Abbey Road.
in
That's what I
it
want to
was
do.
it was great. It was amazing, and not just all the songs, but all of the history that led to that, and how John Lennon was in a ska band, and they'd play some of that music as well. So I mean, depending on what you like, it depends on where you would go. It's a whole country with all sorts of things to do.
Okay, so this brings up my next point. It leads right into
Yeah.
it. This is the Retirement for Life show. I am talking to my friends, my clients, my listeners who are in retirement or nearing retirement, and
Hmm.
always we're talking about money. So this is kind of a money question. Clearly for me, obviously, if based on the last 5 minutes of conversation, I have no idea what I would want to do, even where I would want to go, what regions I would need to get the
Hmm.
help of somebody. But my clients always ask me, they're always watching their dollars and cents. Should I use a travel agent? And I understand there's a difference between an agent and an advisor. We'll talk about that in a second here
Right.
down the road. But in general, is it wise for me to use that third party to get the help for this trip? And obviously, if we're going to take a trip across state lines for a long weekend, we probably don't need that outside help. If we're planning the trip of a lifetime around the world, maybe we would. Are they saving us money? are they costing us money where we could just do it ourselves? What's the overall truth behind using a third party, whether it be an agent or an advisor, to help us plan that trip?
Yeah, let's talk about travel agents first, and set aside the travel advisor for just a second here, and look at the economics of travel. So if you are booking up a airplane ticket, there is very little profit in the airplane ticket for the airline.
Oh,
And so the airline industry announced that in the US, the average profit per ticket is about $5.
wow. How do they
And
make
so
money?
from credit cards. They are predominantly credit card companies in terms of where the source of their revenue is coming from these days in the US.
Brooke, did you know
And
that?
so
That's crazy. Go ahead. Wow.
and so they don't have much money that the travel agent is not really going to get a cutback.
There's no room for the agent there.
There's no room for the agent in terms of getting money, and so a lot of travel agents don't even book airline anymore, or if
Hmm.
they do, they charge you for it because they have to. There's no money in that from them from the
Interesting.
airline.
Huh.
So, in terms of booking your flights, will you save money by going through a travel agent? Probably not. Not if you have just a very simple explanations in terms of like all the alternative to that is using a meta search engine, and that's a search engine that's searching multiple different sites. Kayak and Skyscanner, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
are two very popular meta search engines for flights. And so they're going to search Expedia. They're going to search, a lot of different places. Google is another one. TripAdvisor has their own flights, which I used to be in charge of.
Oh, wow.
So I was the director of engineering for TripAdvisor flights, so I know that one well.
Wow.
So if you use one of those search engines, you're more likely to find, a good flight. But you do have to know something about, how long do I want to have a layover? You don't want to do a 30-minute layover
Mm-hmm.
when you're trying to clear customs or something like that. The flights will generally be put together not to offer you that, but there's a couple things like that you have to watch out for. But generally, with money, with hotels, with flights, can you save money by going through a travel agent? No. And again, just talking money for a second. For hotels, now, how many hotels do you know that are booked up every day?
I would say none.
Almost none.
Yeah.
There is always a room in most hotels except for that occasional thing when there's an event going on. And so
Ah.
hotels have money that they are paying the travel blogger who's recommending it to you, or the travel agent or whatever. And so the you when a travel agent books your hotel, they are getting a kickback from the hotel, most
Okay.
likely.
Okay.
If you click on a link on my website, on a bunch of other bloggers' websites or something like that, it's quite possible. Hopefully, I'm also getting a cut of that.
Gotcha.
But so that means that they can book that for no additional charge for you. So you're not necessarily saving
Mm-hmm.
money, but
Mm-hmm.
you're probably not paying any more money. You don't have to pay them necessarily to do that. In terms of, does your travel agent, so just the money part, and let's just finish this up with cruises. With cruises, it's a little different because you and I may book, one cruise a year, two cruises a year, or something like that. A travel agent is booking cruises constantly, and then they work for an agency that's booking maybe thousands of cruises if they're part of a larger agency. Even some of the local agencies, they might be able to get you a better deal in not necessarily that you're saving money on the cruise, but then you're going to get the cabin upgrade, or you're going to get some money towards onboard spending or something like that if you go through a travel agent. So can you save money on a cruise by going through a travel agent? More likely,
Mm-hmm.
because of the economics of that.
Okay.
The hotels are different because one travel agent is not necessarily going to book that hotel so often that they get a
Discount or
discount or
whatever.
anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. You're probably going to get as good a discount by going through. Again, I would recommend a meta search engine, a search engine that is searching multiple different places, potentially for hotels.
Okay.
So you can go to some place like hotelscombined.com or something like that. That's gonna you look in different places,
So
or you go to or your usual OTA or online travel agent, hotel.com or booking.com or
so
something.
before you go to talk about a travel advisor, I'm going to
Yeah.
summarize what I think I heard you say about travel agent. And this has been
But we
my
only said one thing about travel agent. We talked about money.
Oh, you got more.
Now,
Go ahead. So far I've heard
there are
that they
other reasons to use travel agents,
Okay.
right? Or travel advisors, and that is how much time do you have to plan a trip, and how much do you enjoy the trip planning process?
And what's the
And do
chances that
you
you
want to
screw it
sing
up?
that can happen, but it can also
It
happen with
has
travel
happened.
agents. Yep.
Okay.
And so the and do you want a phone number to call if something goes wrong?
Right.
That is one number for your whole trip. And
Mhm.
and that is where I think a lot of people use travel agents is more of I don't want to think about it. I don't want to, I don't want to book it or whatever. And I want to have somebody that I can call if something goes wrong. And I think that is a better reason to use a travel agent. Now, is it likely that the travel agent that you just walk into their office on Main Street in your town knows something about the destination you're going to? Well, if it's one of those well-known destinations, there's a decent chance. If it's something more obscure, there's a pretty remote chance that they'll be an expert in that area. So they may just be doing the same thing you would be doing. They may
Mhm.
be just looking at the same search engines you could already look at,
Yeah.
but they may have time to do it. That may be a good advice, maybe a good reason for you to do it if the travel planning is not the thing you enjoy. A lot of people, that is the part they really enjoy, is that the thinking about the trip
Oh,
and planning the trip. So you have to put yourself in one camp or the other there, but that's a different
interesting.
value than am I going to save money on the hotel. And then we get to travel advisors where you're actually paying a fee, but they are more destination experts.
Mhm.
So if you're going to do the trip and, here are the sites I want to see in Italy, or I don't know what sites I want to see in Italy, going to an Italian travel planner, then they're more likely to tell you, well, this is the itinerary that I would recommend. And there are tour companies like that as well. I think of when we went to Croatia the first time, and we were flying on points and miles, and so we couldn't fly into Dubrovnik because there just wasn't availability. So we flew into nearby Bosnia Herzegovina into Sarajevo. And so, but then we talked to a company called J-Way Travel, and they're specialists in sort of Central Europe is where they started. They started in Croatia and in some of the countries north of there and in the Balkans and such. And they're experts in that area. And so they said, well, hey, we'll put together an itinerary for you. We'll pick the hotels. We know the hotels in that region. We're going to get you from here to there. We're going to take you in a van here, and then we're going to get you a rental car here. And here's the person you call if there's any problem. They're in country in your time zone,
Mhm.
which is not going to be true with your travel agent, right? If you arrive at 6 a.m. and you've got a problem with your travel agent, your travel agent is in Chicago and you're in London, are you even going to be able to get them on the
Right.
phone? So,
Right.
but a travel agent, a travel advisor, or a travel company that is doing that level of destination expertise, you're going to pay for that, but are you going to have a better trip because of it? Probably.
Yeah.
So it's a trade-off there. That's
Okay.
not a you don't go to a travel advisor to save money necessarily, but they will help you plan a trip if you don't have time to plan a trip, if you're really looking for an expert.
That's a
That's
great way to explain it. And frankly, I didn't realize there was the difference between the two. And when you
yeah.
explain it like that, it really makes sense. And clearly, there's a difference, but you can see value in both. I want to tell you about the thing that gets me so frustrated more than anything else on a trip, on a vacation, um, when I'm with a group of people. There's always that guy, and everyone knows this guy in their group of friends who has to over plan, over schedule the entire itinerary of the entire trip to the point where you feel like you are just bouncing around from place to place and you're getting so stressed out you cannot wait to go back to work so you can calm down again. And I think that's a big mistake that really frustrates me. I've been on these vacations where I'm just not enjoying myself because all I'm doing is looking at my watch the entire time to see if I have a minute and 30 seconds before the next stop. Um, that's a common one, I think, in my mind. Are there some common mistakes that these travelers are making that they
Well,
need
let's
to
talk
avoid?
about travel planning just a bit here before we get to your other question of are there other mistakes?
Yeah.
Because one person's over planning is another person's planning, right? And there are different levels of planning, um, and there are different levels that are appropriate for you. And first of all, the number one rule that you just came up with without talking about it in terms of having a good vacation is the people you go with.
Right.
And
I'm
there's
choosing the
some
wrong
people
people to go on vacation with,
who
is
may
what
be
you're
good
telling me.
friends of ours who we should not travel with, and
Yeah.
figuring that out is
Okay.
very important
Okay.
because it could be that that person's level of that gives them comfort to have that level of planning, and for you it doesn't. So maybe you're not good travel planning.
Okay. It
Might be
just,
good.
Brian, you heard it. My friend Brian, we're not going on vacation anymore together. Okay. That's a
So
good point.
and to put it in context in terms of over planning, or at least in terms of extreme planning. I have a friend who had a coworker who was going on a sabbatical in 6 months. And so she was talking to him, and he had a spreadsheet for where all he was going day by day with all the hotels he was going to stay in. Okay, that's I'd say a lot of us do that level of planning. He also had looked in all those cities for all the restaurants and looked at restaurant recommendations. Okay, well that's interesting. He had decided what restaurants he was going to eat at for every meal for this trip that was six
He
months out.
knew what menu item he was going to order.
Oh my, yes, I was getting
Come
to that. He had
on.
gone
You're
online and
kidding
had
me.
gone to the menus and had decided
Come
what he was gonna
on.
order. I can't, that level of planning would be too much for me, because it does leave off the, "Hey, what is that I smell?" or "What's the
Yeah.
special of the day?" or all
Yeah.
those sorts of things.
Oh,
For me, that would be too much, but I think he probably thoroughly enjoyed that level of trip planning.
okay.
That's why he was doing it.
Hmm.
So in terms of and there's two different issues here. One is the planning, and two is the over scheduling.
Hmm.
And so, for instance, when I'm traveling by myself, I might do that whole, it's 9 o'clock. I want to get from here to here. I was just down doing some local travel yesterday, and I had, my day planned that I'm going to do, I'm going to be here at 9 o'clock, and then I'm going to do this and all sorts of things like that. But when I'm traveling with my family, I have to plan on doing half as much.
Hmm.
It's just not the right pace when I'm traveling with my wife to be, to eat the sandwich on the go so I can see one more museum or something like that. That's the wrong pace for that group of when
Right.
I'm with them.
Right. All right. As we're wrapping up here, the last thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. People are always asking me, we've got this huge event coming up, 50th wedding anniversary. It's a retirement
Mhm.
party, whatever that is. I want to have that bucket list trip. Where do they go? What a huge open-ended question. But where do I take my bucket list cruise or my bucket list trip? Where is that? Where do I go?
So it depends on you. So let's try five different
Shoot me some
scenarios here.
idea. Yeah, there you go. Give
Yeah,
it to
just
me.
off the top of my head. You're a beer lover,
Right here.
okay?
Right here.
So I might think about Belgium. I might think about
Mm,
Prague. I might think about Germany. Doing something that is exploring something you love and going the places where they do that. Where they do that well. If you're a baseball fan, it might be you don't leave the U.S. You try and visit all the ballparks or a number of different ballparks. We have friends who literally visited all the major league parks,
hmm.
and that was really what they wanted to do. If you love a zoo and you've never been on a safari, I can highly recommend going on safari at least once. It is an amazing experience.
Wow.
To be on safari in Africa is like nothing else. If you're a history buff like me, then standing at the Great Pyramids
Hmm.
is a once in a lifetime experience. Cruising down the Nile, places where the civilization goes back 5,000 years
Hmm.
is an amazing experience. So it depends a bit on you, but for whatever your interest is, if cooking is your jam, What's your favorite cuisine? Do you love Italian cuisine? Then explore Italy south to north, and the different types of cuisine, because there's our cuisine is not Italian. Our cuisine is American Italian. And so it's very different when you're in Italy. Go to Bologna, which is known for food in Italy. So there is something for you, again, possibly domestic, possibly international, depending on what you are interested in doing. And I think that's why it's your bucket list, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So it sounds like I'm going to Prague, and then I'm going to go down to Italy and eat some food for my bucket list trip. So
that's a pretty good trip. Pretty good trip.
All right. So Chris Christensen from the Amateur Traveler Podcast, I want to thank you for your time. We probably have a lot of people who would love to listen to your podcast or find out more. You have a great website. What are the best ways for us to find you and hear more or see more of your content?
Sure. Well, all my content is on amateurtraveler.com, as well as links to all of my social media. You can also just send me an email, chris2x@gmail.com. And then my podcast can be found wherever you find podcasts. I've been out there. Been doing this for 19 years. So
that's amazing. That's amazing. We really appreciate you spending time with us today, Chris. I want to thank you very much. We'll be out there and we'll be traveling and we'll be thinking of you. Take care. Okay, so that was our interview today with Chris Christensen. I want to say thanks again to Chris for coming on the show. I know that most of my listeners and my clients, my retirees, are going to want to hear that, and we're probably getting a lot of good stuff out of that interview today. Something fun to talk about. We've had a record number of people watching our videos for us. We've had a record number of people filling out the AIM retirement assessment. We're meeting people from across the country. It's just been a lot of fun. Our firm, Seer Financial, has been growing, and it's just such a privilege and an honor to be doing these shows and these videos. And for me, it's let's just be nice and call myself a middle-aged man. Bringing this journey to the masses has been a struggle, as Brooke sitting here can attest to. We've certainly are still learning how to do good things, to share good information, to make it fun, but really give quality information to our retirees and soon-to-be retirees. So that's all for this episode. Our next episode is something that's really taken off here lately. We've had several clients, and myself included, have been selling our real estate, not paying the taxes, and getting more diversification, getting less work, getting less headaches, getting to free up some of our time. And we've had that piece of real estate or several pieces of real estate that we've owned for a long time, and we're finding there are better ways to own real estate. We can sell our real estate and, believe it or not pay any taxes and still benefit from having real estate in our portfolio, minus all of the issues that come with owning real estate typically. So that will be our next episode. Thanks again for joining us today on Retirement for Life podcast. This is Christian Sear, CPA, saying thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Investment advisory services provided by Seer Financial, Inc., SEC registered investment advisor. All content on this podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered investment, legal, or tax advice. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to another party's informational accuracy or completeness.